It was just another quiet night in Seattle, rain tapping against windows, streets empty, the city asleep. But then, a knock. 3 sharp hits that would change everything. When Harry opened his door, a terrified little girl stood there, drenched in rain, trembling, and crying for help. Her words would freeze his blood. "They beat my mama. She's dying." From that single knock began a night of chaos, courage, and heartbreak. A story that proves heroes aren't born. Sometimes they just answer the door. The night was cold and wet, the kind of night when the city feels half asleep and the rain never stops whispering against the glass. Inside a small apartment on Maple Street, Harry Cooper sat alone on his worn couch, reading an old newspaper and sipping lukewarm coffee. The dim light from the lamp flickered as thunder rolled across the Seattle sky. It was just past midnight, and everything felt still until 3 sharp knocks shattered the silence. Fast, desperate, and frightened, Harry froze, the sound cutting straight through his chest. He wasn't expecting anyone. Another knock came, this one even harder. He stood slowly, setting his cup down. His building wasn't exactly the kind of place people visited in the middle of the night. He walked to the door and peered through the peephole. At first, he saw nothing but rain. Then a small figure came into view. A little girl, maybe 6 or 7, drenched from head to toe, her small hands trembling as she knocked again. He opened the door halfway, keeping the chain lock on. "Hey there," he said softly, confused. "You okay?" The girl's lips quivered, her voice breaking as she whispered, "Please. They beat my mama. She's dying." Her words hit him like a punch to the gut. For a second, he didn't even move, trying to process what she'd just said. Rain dripped from her hair onto the floor, and she looked up at him with eyes full of raw terror. Without another thought, Harry unlatched the chain and knelt beside her. "Where is she?" he asked urgently. The girl pointed toward the alley that ran behind the building. Her tiny hand shook as she spoke. "Over there, in our house. Please hurry." Harry grabbed his coat from the hook, slipped on his boots, and followed her out into the storm. The rain was cold, biting at his face, but he didn't care. Something deep inside him told him this was no time to hesitate. They ran through puddles and shadows, their footsteps echoing off the brick walls. The streetlights flickered, giving the alley an eerie glow. The girl led him past dumpsters and old fences until they reached a small rundown house at the end of the block. The front door was cracked open, and light spilled faintly through the gap. Harry's chest tightened. "Is anyone else in there?" he whispered. The girl nodded fearfully. "He's still there," she said. "The man who hurt her." Harry felt a chill crawl down his spine. He didn't know what he was walking into, but leaving wasn't an option. He pulled out his phone, turning on the flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating the worn wooden steps and the peeling paint on the door. He pushed it open slowly, and the hinges groaned. The smell hit him first: alcohol, smoke, and something metallic. Blood. He stepped inside, his heart pounding. The little girl clung to his sleeve, her breathing quick and shallow. Inside, the living room was a wreck. A table was overturned, broken glass scattered across the floor. A TV hummed in the background, showing static. On the far side of the room, near a torn couch, lay a woman, motionless. Harry rushed to her side and knelt down. Her face was swollen, bruises forming along her cheek and temple. Her breathing was shallow, but she was alive. He looked back at the girl. "She's still breathing," he said softly. Relief flickered in her eyes, but only for a second before fear replaced it again. Then, a sound. A heavy thud from somewhere deeper in the house. Harry's flashlight jerked toward the hallway. Someone was still there. He stood up, motioning for the girl to stay put. "Don't move," he whispered. The boards creaked under his boots as he moved toward the sound. His pulse was racing now, every instinct screaming at him to be careful. The faint smell of whiskey grew stronger. He could hear a man muttering, low and angry, somewhere near the back room. Harry peeked around the corner and saw him, a large man, maybe in his 30s, pacing near a kitchen counter cluttered with empty bottles. His fists were red, and his shirt was stained with what looked like blood. "She had it coming," the man growled to himself, slamming a bottle onto the table. The sound made Harry flinch. He knew he was outmatched if it came to a fight, but he also knew he couldn't walk away. He took a slow step forward, careful not to draw attention. Suddenly, the man turned. Their eyes met, and the silence exploded. "Who the hell are you?" the man shouted, staggering toward him. Harry raised his hands. "I'm just trying to help," he said quickly, his voice steady but firm. The man's lip curled into a sneer. "Help? You think I need help?" He grabbed a half-empty bottle and hurled it across the room. It smashed against the wall, shards flying. The girl screamed from the living room, and the man's face twisted with rage. "You brought someone here?" Harry stepped forward, blocking the man's path to the girl. "You're not touching her," he said. His voice was low now, calm but dangerous. The man laughed, staggering closer. "You don't even know what's going on, pal." "I know enough," Harry shot back. "I know you're hurting your family." For a moment, the man's eyes flickered, something like guilt, but it vanished in an instant as he lunged forward. Harry dodged, shoving him into the wall. The man crashed into a shelf, sending bottles tumbling to the ground. The sound was deafening. The little girl was crying now, calling out for her mother. Harry's hands trembled, adrenaline surging through him. The man stumbled back up, wild and furious. "You're dead!" he roared, charging again. But before he could reach Harry, a voice echoed from outside, a neighbor shouting, "Hey, what's going on in there?" The distraction was enough. Harry grabbed the man by the arm, twisting it hard until the bottle fell from his grip. "Stay down," he yelled, but the man struggled, cursing and swinging wildly. Harry slammed him against the wall again, harder this time. The man's body went limp, sliding down to the floor. For a moment, the only sound was the rain hammering against the roof. Harry stood there, breathing hard, hands shaking. He turned back toward the living room. The woman was still barely conscious, her eyes fluttering open for just a second. "My baby," she whispered, reaching weakly toward her daughter. The girl ran to her, clutching her hand. "Mama, please don't leave," she cried. Harry dropped to his knees beside them. "She needs a hospital," he said, pulling out his phone. He dialed 911, explaining everything in a rushed, shaky voice. The dispatcher's calm tone barely registered in his ears. He looked around, half expecting the man to get up again, but he didn't move. Outside, sirens began to wail faintly in the distance. The little girl was still crying, holding on to her mother's hand as if she could keep her alive by sheer will. "It's okay," Harry whispered. "Help is coming." The sirens grew louder, flashing lights spilling through the doorway as paramedics rushed in. They lifted the woman carefully, checking her pulse and wrapping her in blankets. Police officers stormed through the door, grabbing the unconscious man and handcuffing him. The whole room seemed to blur together. Voices, movement, the smell of rain and blood. Harry stood back, watching as they carried the woman out on a stretcher. The little girl looked up at him, eyes full of fear and gratitude. "You saved us," she whispered. Harry didn't know what to say. He just nodded, watching as the ambulance doors closed and the flashing lights disappeared down the street. The rain kept falling, washing the blood off the pavement. The officers took his statement, thanked him, then left him standing there in the doorway of that broken home. The night felt heavier now, quieter, as if the storm had taken something with it. Harry turned to look at the little girl one last time. She was safe. That was all that mattered. The rain hadn't stopped. It poured harder as dawn began to break, turning the street silver under the flickering streetlights. Harry stood alone outside the hospital, his coat soaked through, the night's chaos still spinning in his mind. The ambulance had rushed away hours ago, sirens fading into the distance, and now everything felt too quiet. He rubbed his hands together, trying to shake the chill from his bones. But it wasn't the cold that bothered him. It was the memory of that little girl's voice crying, "They beat my mama." Inside the hospital, the air smelled of antiseptic and coffee. Harry found himself sitting in the waiting area, still in his damp clothes, staring at the floor. Nurses passed by, clipboards in hand, voices low and steady. He hadn't even asked the girl's name, he realized. Everything had happened so fast. He replayed it in his head, the man's drunken rage, the fear in the child's eyes, the woman gasping for breath. It all felt unreal, like something from a movie, except the blood on his jacket was real enough to prove otherwise. A doctor finally approached, holding a chart. "Mr. Cooper?" she asked. Harry nodded, standing quickly. "She's alive," the doctor said. But it was close. Broken ribs, internal bleeding. She's in recovery now. Harry exhaled, shoulders dropping in relief. And the little girl? He asked. The doctor smiled gently. She's with a social worker for now. She keeps asking about you. Harry blinked, surprised. About me? Yes, the doctor said softly. She said you're the man who saved her mama. A few minutes later, Harry followed the nurse down a quiet hallway to the pediatric waiting room. The little girl sat on a plastic chair, clutching a stuffed bear that looked almost as old as she was. Her hair was still damp, but someone had given her a blanket and a cup of cocoa. When she saw him, her face lit up for the first time that night. You came, she said softly. Harry smiled faintly. Yeah, I wasn't going anywhere. He knelt in front of her. How's your mom doing? The girl looked down. They said she's gonna be okay, she whispered. She always said angels don't forget people. I think you're one. Harry chuckled lightly, though his throat tightened. I'm no angel, kiddo, he said. Just a guy who answered the door. She smiled shyly. I'm Lily, she added. And my mama's name is Grace. Harry nodded. Lily and Grace, he said quietly. That's beautiful. For a moment there was peace. No sirens, no shouting. Just a tired man and a brave little girl sitting in a quiet hospital room. But peace never lasts long. A police officer entered the room a few minutes later, his badge glinting under the fluorescent lights. Mr. Cooper, he asked. We need to take your statement down at the station. The man we arrested, name's Ray Dalton. Grace's husband. Harry's jaw tightened. Is she safe from him? For now, yes, the officer replied. But Dalton's got a record. Assault, burglary, you name it. He'll be charged again, but he's got connections. He might not stay locked up for long. The words sent a cold chill through Harry's chest. Harry gave his statement. Every detail burned into his mind. The knocks, the screams, the blood. The officers thanked him, called him a hero, but the word didn't sit right. Heroes slept at night. He hadn't slept since the knock at midnight. By the time he returned to his apartment, the sky was pale gray. He tossed his wet jacket onto the couch and sank into the same spot he'd been sitting in before everything changed. The newspaper was still there, the coffee cold. He stared at the door, half expecting another knock. Days passed, but the story didn't leave him. The police had called once, saying Grace was still recovering. Lily had been placed in temporary care while social services worked things out. Harry tried to move on. Go to work, fix the leaky faucet, pretend life was normal again. But every sound reminded him of that night. Sometimes he'd dream of the alley, the smell of rain and blood, the fear in Lily's voice. He'd wake up with his heart racing, the echo of her tiny fists knocking still haunting his ears. One evening, about a week later, Harry came home to find a note taped to his door. The handwriting was shaky, written in blue ink. Thank you for saving my life. Grace and Lily. There was a phone number scrawled underneath. He stared at it for a long time before dialing. When Grace's voice answered, soft and tired, he didn't know what to say. It's Harry, he finally murmured. The guy from that night. There was a pause. Then Grace whispered, I remember. I don't know how to thank you. They met a few days later at a small cafe near the hospital. Grace looked fragile, a scarf covering the bruises on her neck, but her eyes were strong. Lily sat beside her, coloring on a napkin. We're staying in a shelter for now, Grace explained quietly. They said it's safer until the case is settled. Harry nodded, unsure what to say. If you ever need anything, he began, but Grace stopped him. You've done enough, she said gently. You showed up when no one else did. Her voice trembled. You saved us. Before leaving, Lily hugged him tightly. Mama says we'll get a new house soon, she said with a grin. And when we do, you can come visit. Harry smiled and promised he would. As they walked away, something stirred inside him. Hope, maybe, or something close to it. For the first time in a long while, he felt like he'd done something that mattered. But life isn't a fairy tale. 2 weeks later, Harry's phone rang again. This time it was the same officer. His tone was grim. Mr. Cooper, we need to talk. It's about Ray Dalton. Harry's stomach dropped. Don't tell me he's out, he said. The officer hesitated. The bail hearing? His lawyer pulled some strings. He's been released under supervision. Harry's blood ran cold. And Grace. She's been moved again, the officer replied. Somewhere safe, we hope. But Harry didn't trust hope. He knew what men like Dalton were capable of. That night, he barely slept. Every creak in the hallway sounded like a threat. He kept his phone beside him, waiting for a call, praying it wouldn't come. The call came 3 nights later, Lily's voice trembling through the static. "Mr. Harry." "He found us." Her whisper was so soft he almost didn't hear it. "We're hiding in the laundry room." "Mama said to call you." Harry's heart slammed in his chest. "Stay quiet," he said quickly. "Don't move, okay? I'm coming." He grabbed his car keys and was out the door before the sentence was finished. The rain had returned, heavy and relentless, just like that night. As he drove, his mind raced. He'd promised they'd be safe. He couldn't fail them now. When Harry reached the shelter, the front door was open, the lock broken. Inside, the lights flickered, and the sound of shouting echoed from the back. He moved carefully, keeping low, every nerve on fire. He followed the sound to the laundry room and pushed the door open just as Ray Dalton raised a gun toward Grace. Time seemed to slow. Harry lunged, tackling Dalton to the ground. The gun went off, the sound deafening in the small room. Screams filled the air. Grace shielded Lily as Harry fought for control of the weapon. The struggle was brutal. Dalton was stronger, fueled by rage and whiskey. But Harry was fighting for something bigger, for the terrified girl hiding behind that washing machine, for the woman who'd already lost too much. With one desperate push, Harry slammed Dalton's hand against the wall. The gun clattered to the floor. Dalton threw a punch, catching Harry across the jaw, but Harry didn't stop. He swung back, adrenaline carrying him. Then finally sirens again, the same sound that had saved them once before. Police burst through the door, weapons drawn. "Drop it!" Dalton froze, breathing hard, blood trickling from his temple. He looked at Harry, eyes burning with hate, before the officers dragged him away. Grace collapsed to the floor, shaking, and Lily ran straight into Harry's arms, crying. "I knew you'd come," she sobbed. He hugged her tightly, closing his eyes as the chaos faded into background noise. The officers led Dalton out, shouting commands. But Harry barely heard them. All he could hear was Lily's heartbeat against his chest, proof that she was still alive, still safe. Hours later, the shelter was quiet again. Grace sat beside him on the steps, wrapped in a blanket. "You saved us twice now," she said softly. Harry smiled faintly, looking at the sunrise breaking through the rain clouds. "Let's hope there's no third time," he replied. She laughed weakly, then turned serious. "You didn't have to come tonight," she said. "You could have stayed out of it." Harry looked at her, eyes heavy with exhaustion. "Yeah," he said quietly, "but then I wouldn't be me." The rain had finally stopped. The sky was painted gold, and for the first time in weeks the world felt calm. Grace and Lily would be moved again, this time somewhere far from Dalton's reach. As Harry watched them drive away in the police van, he felt something he hadn't in years. Peace. Maybe he wasn't an angel, like Lily said. Maybe he was just a man who refused to look away. But sometimes that's all it takes to change a life. The knock that began one nightmare had ended another.